Yeah, greetings and welcome back to another Umojo session brought to you by the Pan African Congress movement. Now, today's topic, Hidden Forces versus Pan Africanism, is more or less a continuation of the discussion from last week with a few additions added on. So, what I like to do now, before we actually get into the discussion proper, there's Undugwe Mani would normally come in and change the energy for us. After which, I'll go to each speaker to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll enter into the topic. So I'd like to bring now Undugwe Mani in.
Asante sana, and Hamjambo Jamal. So greetings, kindred in Kiswahili. Kiswahili is a language that we use in PACM because at the 6th Pan African Congress, it was said that when we have that entity, that the lingua franca, the language for commerce, for education, for and so on and so forth, for communication, should be Kiswahili, as it's spoken by so many Africans across the continent. It's a good place to start, but still respecting all other languages and cultures at the same time. So that's what the Pan African Congress movements use. Okay, so before I start, I've got elders here. So Mzee Cecil, Mzee Pepkan Baba Mandengo. Before I start with our ritual, do I have your permission to proceed?
Please proceed, my brother.
Yes. Okay, Asante Sana. Okay, right. Ndugu Tahaka, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right, can that be seen in Ndugu?
Yes.
Okay, right, wonderful. Okay, so in order to start on Mabade Liko Yani Shate, a change of energy, we're going to go through a ritual of breathing. There's going to be things on the screen that are in Kiswahili and in Kemetic language as well, but there's translations for everything, so you can follow. If you do wish to participate, please do. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. African spirituality isn't about coercion. It's about love and sharing and growth in our way. Okay, so in order to begin, we're going to breathe, because breath is our connection between our physical state and our spiritual state, and it's that bridge. And breathing is life, and especially at this time when we want to be breathing deeply and using our full lung capacity with so much mask wearing and so on and so forth. So if you wish to take part, please sit straight with your back straight in your chair, so that your energy centers, your 7 energy centers, are in line. Feet flat on the floor, palms on your thighs, and we're going to breathe together 4 times. 4 is the spiritual number for health, and it is for also denotes foundation and strength. So when we breathe out, we're going to breathe out and pull our stomachs in, and that will force the air out of our mouths, and then we will relax the stomach and the air will rush in through our nose. Okay, out through the mouth, in through the nose. Okay, so breathing this way because this is the way that we should be breathing, and it stops us from being where our enemies would want us to be, which is reactive, animalistic and emotional, but thinking clearly and in our full understanding and using all our faculties, our spiritual and our physical faculties. So we shall begin. So breathing out, hold it, and relax stomach. Breathe in, Moja, and breathe out. Pull the stomach in. And relax. stomach, breathe in. Belly, breathe out. When stomach in. Hold it. Relax. Stomach, breathe in. Hold it. That's Tatu. Now breathe out. And now relax stomach and breathe in through the nose. In there. Okay, beautiful. So I'll continue with the rest of the ritual. So to change the energy or vibration, we now thank the powers to ask that we have a closer connection with them and that they assist us in manifesting our objectives. And in order to do that, I'm going to ring the chime here, the triangle chime 7 times. 7 is a strong spiritual number, which means intuition, wisdom, seeking, and truth. And we see it in the physical realm, 7 major notes in the musical scale, 7 colors in the spectrum, 7 entrances to the body, and so on and so forth. So I will ring the chime. Each time that the chime rings, allow the energy to go over you, around you, and through you, the vibration. And that will open up your consciousness to universal consciousness and thereby opening our connection to each other wherever we are in the world. Okay, so continue to breathe deeply and I'll begin. Moja. Breathing. Tatu. In there. Tana. Sita. Saba. Okay. So I'll just run through this, and what we'll say in this call and response part is Sisi ni kitu kimoja, which means we are one or we are the same thing. Very powerful affirmation, considering we're calling upon the powers and the ancestors and the creator or the all, and that noting that we are one and the same thing. Okay, I begin. Ninaomba ya muumba awote, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba ya nebacha, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya mamiwata, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya shu, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya tefnut, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya nut, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Now going on to the PACMTV, or the Kemetic Tree of Life, which are the company of the aspects of Wote, or the all. Let's see here. Begin with the first. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Geb, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Alset, Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Sebek. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Hetaru. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Haru. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Herakuti. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Maat. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Saka. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Tahuti. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Ausa. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Amen. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Now we can go on to those ancestors. First ones we should call, the ones who are on our direct bloodline. I'll begin. Ninaomba Audrey Mae Kelly. Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Aislinn Rattigan.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. And did anybody else you wish to call?
Or anybody else want
Yes,
to call?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Pepper Kai is saying something, but he's muted, I think.
And did MZ Pepper, you need to unmute?
Calling the great spirit of Grandfather James, Grandmother Muriel, Grandmother Daisy, and Grandaunt Augusta.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
Ninaomba call on my grandmother Louise Hines and my grandfather Sylvester Rattigan.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Anyone else? Okay, I'll continue. Now we can call upon those ancestors not in our direct bloodline, but those who are given their time, effort, blood, and lives for our families, for our communities, for our nation, and for our race. Ninaomba MZ, the Honorable Marcus Mazar Garvey. Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Kwame Ture.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Wazee Amy Ashwood Garvey na Amy Jacques Garvey. Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Yeah, ninaomba Ya Santwa.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Nyamba Nana Bonsu.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Amawali Alhaj Malik Shabazz Malcolm X. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Else? Okay. Ninaomba Baba Tegel. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Mzee John Henry Clark. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Mzee Dr. Francis Quest Wilson. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. And now I can call upon those ancestors who we don't always know their names, but they left us a tremendous legacy. First of all, those who are always looking for us to call upon them, and we should never forget. Ninaomba mababu ya Mangamazi, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba mababu ya Asian Revolution, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba mababu ya taifa la Masai, the nation of Masai, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba mababu ya Gula Vita, those ancestors who fought in the Gula Wars, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba mataifa ya Kemet na Taseti na Nubia na Kush, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba mababu ya Asian Revolution, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba mababu ya San na Twa na Hutu, sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninawaomba wanaishi ambao watatutetea sisi na wale mababu ambao bado hawajazaliwa, sisi ni kitu kimoja. And we end on the affirmation and words of power. And just repeat after me. Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Kwa watu wetu.
Kwa watu wetu.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Asanteni sana, jamaa. Thanks very much, family.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now we'll get into the discussion itself. As I said last week, we had a very energetic discussion around the US elections, and it's I tell you what, there's a lot of noise in the background. I'm not sure who is coming from. So could everybody, if you're not speaking, mute your mic. Yeah.
And I'll join you later.
Yeah, okay. Right. Yes, as I said last week, we had a very energetic discussion looking at the US elections and its implication on Africa and the Caribbean. Now, this week is more or less a continuation in the same vein, but we'll be looking more in depth at certain aspects of what took place, especially pertaining to the African American or Black American community. And the reason I said it like that, because from what I am reading, there is a difference. There is a big difference in those who call themselves African Americans and those who call themselves Black Americans. And so our panelists today will have Elder Cecil and also Brother Mandingo and also Elder Pepperkai. I know he may come in from time to time, but he'll be there keenly listening. We were supposed to have another speaker. He hasn't shown up as yet. So as soon as he gets here, I will put him on the screen. So now I would like to start up with Elder Cecil. And because I know from some messages I got from him, he was very keen for this discussion to carry on, because there were certain things that he thought, how could I say, wasn't, I don't know, clarified enough, wasn't clear enough, and he would like to put some more clarification onto those particular points. So now I like Elder Cecil to come in. And as you come in, Elder Cecil, could you just say a little bit about yourself for new listeners, who you are and some of the achievements, some of the things that you have done?
You had asked me, and I apologize, it no doubt my technical incompetence. You had asked me to say something about myself very briefly. I am an aging, if you like, or old activist. I have been in the PACM since the beginning in 1974. Active in the UK African community before that, from really the 1960s when I was a student in Leicester, and I am trying to remain active and until such time. I am, like our brother was saying, African Jamaican, proudly so. All right. The topic is not actually mine. I see hidden forces versus Pan-Africanism, and I'd hope that somebody would speak before me and indicate what these hidden forces are thought or being said to be. And I also see our powerful forces shaping Pan-Africanism in a clandestine manner. And again, my hope really was that another of the contributors would explore for the listeners and me what these forces are. As the kind of Pan-Africanist I am and have long been, I think that it is very important for us Africans to be clear both about who we are and about who the enemy is. And the enemy isn't hidden, although our enemies are capable of acting clandestinely, but they're not hidden. Our main enemy is racist, Euro-American capitalism, imperialism, white power, if you will, white terrorism, if you will. That is clearly our enemy. If we're looking more specifically at Africa, the way Africa is dominated, argument can be made for exploitative and domineering Arabic Islamic forces being also an enemy of African people. And so there are external enemies, the main one I've just mentioned, but there are also internal enemies, the people who have allowed themselves to be installed in our community, in our states, on behalf of those forces, and who are running things within our community on the basis of facilitating the exploitation of the majority of us in the interest of that small minority, and also fundamentally interest of the external enemy, which I repeat, I see as the forces primarily of the white world. Now, I understand that there are those in our community who don't see those forces as main enemy, see a possible something called the world government or something called the Illuminati, possibly much more important and much more secret enemies. I tend to understand that position, and I was listening to a radio show by one of those persons in our community, and I heard him say the United States election wasn't just a matter of a struggle between Trump and Biden, but a matter of good and evil. And he actually said that Trump is the one representing good. He said that using what I understand to be some mode of European numerology, that the fact that when Trump came to power, the day he was inaugurated, he was apparently 70 years old, and he was 7 months old and 7 days old. And this somehow makes him almost divine, or specifically divine, certainly some kind of a messenger from the divine. And I was and am appalled by that kind of stuff, because I don't really understand how people who call themselves Pan-Africanists or appear to be in the Pan-Africanist fold can be propounding those ideas. I heard that same brother on this channel in this forum say that somehow we had to recognize you know, Trump's place and acknowledge all of that stuff. Now, I cannot understand why anybody who is African in any way, in any serious way, who is not African specifically committed, while being African specifically committed against African interest, I don't understand how any such person can be making a set of arguments that I'm hearing. And one of them is that the brother was welcoming on this show, I repeat, the prospect of a coup conducted by and on behalf of Trump against apparently the enemy was liberals. And these liberals were going to be arrested and so on. And it's difficult for me to see how any African cannot know that if such a move did take place in the United States of America, that Africans in America and outside would undoubtedly be on the receiving end of that. We're talking about an entity. Trump just had, it is said, slightly over 70 million Americans vote for him. When Obama was voted into office, those same Americans went and bought out literally all of the bullets in American gun shops, and we're talking therefore about enough bullets, and they almost exhausted the gun supply. Those same people have been back to the shops and have stacked up more. These are the allies of Trump, and it's difficult for me to see how somehow it is not understood that were those forces to keep and hold state power, or were they to conduct a coup, that we Africans would not be their main target. Now, in that neck of the woods, Trump has been allowed to get away with all kinds of claims relating to him not being a racist, and it matters that his company records, his record as the holder of a major company in the United States of America, will show that in the 1970s, he took a plea in relation to a prosecution against him for racial discrimination, as a matter of fact. He wasn't found guilty, but he avoided being found guilty by, as we say, taking a plea. There's a whole record along those lines of Trump's racism. Now, and this is not to say that Biden or even Kamala Harris might not be also tainted in some way and in respect of racism. But it matters that Trump conducted a particular kind of campaign, both on this occasion and first time round. We have to remember how his campaign started. It started with an open racist attack on Mexicans. And I know that we don't have to identify, we Africans don't have to identify with Mexicans. But in relation to the United States of America, let us be clear why Trump was able and is able to get away with starting his campaign in that way. Most Americans, including African Americans, don't know that in the 1930s, more than 2 million Mexicans were forcibly deported from the United States of America with no comeback at all, and for no good reason, save racism. Most Americans don't know, and have been, including African Americans, have been caught up in the myth of the Alamo, that allegedly heroic occasion on which some Americans, not many blacks present in the famous representation of it in that film, and so great brave victory for America against these Mexicans who were in much larger numbers. Nationalist Americans, including African Americans who are American nationalists, don't understand that what was at stake there was that one of the later bits of American so-called manifest destiny, that right of whites to take over and run the continent of America, riding over the natives, using black slave labor, annexing the territory of other people, is what that event involved. And it continued. They went a little later in the century and captured Cuba after the Cubans had won their independence from the United States of America. They went across the sea and annexed Honolulu, what's the country? Hawaii.
Hawaii.
They went further in that same period and annexed the Philippines because Spain's empire was falling apart. They thought of those places as low-lying fruit, and they gobbled them up. Repeat, Cuba had already liberated itself, and America entered the war by an atrocity. It sunk one of its own ships, claims that the Spaniards had done it, and then entered the war. Repeat, this is the Cubans for the third time. The Cubans already won their war, and that allowed the Americans to take hold of Cuba, to say that the Cuban constitution could not be changed by the Cubans without the permission of the United States Congress, something called the Platt Amendment. That's what Trump, in the way he appealed on that occasion, is coming off. In this second election, his whole thrust on the back of the uprisings, let us call them that, of black and some white people even, over horrendous deaths of black people. Trump ran a law and order campaign. Everybody will have seen a clip in which he says, suburban women love me. Come and love me. And I'm not going to put any, effectively, the black people from the what do they call them? Those estates, they're not called estates, whatever they're called in the United States of America. I'm not going to put any of them next to you, and so on. And explicitly, and actually quite brilliant, law and order, backward, reactionary, calling upon the worst instincts of white America. And it matters that in one of the first books on the Trump regime, a book called Fire and Fury, the man who wrote it was given permission by Trump as president to sit around the White House and collect his evidence. So he didn't fake anything. And in that, he quotes somebody asking Trump, what is white trash? And Trump's reply is, like me, only poor. So that's how it is that I can't bring myself quite to understand how there are alleged Pan-Africanists who are in favor of Trump. Now, some claims have been made. I'm going to end soon. Some claims have been made on Trump's behalf, which I didn't even bother to investigate. But once you investigate them, none of them stand up. The first one is that he's brought more employment to the African American community than has ever been the case historically. It is true that there's a high rate of employment. I may have said unemployment, a high rate of employment in the African American community. For Trump to be able to take credit for that, there would have had to have been a spike during his presidency. In point of fact, if you go and look at the trend, you will see that the trend in African American employment was already upwards under his predecessor, and it did not spike under him. So he did nothing that led to any increase. The increase was on trend, and he contributed, as far as I can see, nothing to it. There's a claim that he contributed to historically black educational institutions. That turns out to be not true. He's certainly gathered some, I would say, Uncle Tom, African-American church people around him. And there's a famous occasion when he's in this room and maybe 30 approaching that very plump, fellow Africans are in that room with him, praising him to the sky. If you're the president of the United States, and if you are a rich capitalist, it is perfectly possible to bribe or induce those people into coming on in that way and supporting you. Anybody who watches the media knows that there was a subsequent occasion on which a well-informed fellow African Americans denounced all of those people by pointing out the contradictions within the claims that that were being made either by or on Trump's behalf. So I'm not a Bidenite, but it seems to me important that the democratic process in the United States of America, the electoral democratic process, I'm not a great believer in that either, because I believe that democracy in the modern West is simply one of their main mechanisms of class rule, and that class rule is racist. So I'm not, I voted about twice in my my whole life, and I'm well old. So I'm not, but I think that in this instance, it actually does matter that Trump was voted out. And it is true that he was voted out. It is true that he won or obtained the same number of electoral votes. The process isn't finished yet, but there's no way of reversing it. The same number of electoral college votes that Hillary Clinton got, and Trump got exactly the number that, possibly with a revision or two, Biden got on this occasion. It is also the case that Trump didn't win the popular vote on the occasion when he came to office. Mrs. Clinton was ahead of him by some maybe 3 million popular votes. And on this occasion, he's again lost a popular vote by something like 5 million, give or take a few hundred thousand. So without being a Bidenite, I don't have any expectations at all of him, and nobody who is sensible should have any expectations. Incidentally, in the material that was circulated in relation to this event, there's something about both the Democrats and the Republicans being against Pan-Africanism. Clearly that is so, and I don't know who was going to come on and argue otherwise. I'm certainly not amongst those who might argue otherwise. American history is full of domination by two parties, both of which have been systematically racist against African Americans during enslavement and since. Both of those parties were completely complicit with the system of racial terror that was instituted in the United States against African Americans after enslavement ended, in order to terrorize African Americans into submission. Both parties were instrumental in that. And if you come to this end, we have Obama, and everybody knows, it was talked about last time we were on this program, that Obama went to Africa to say to bright young Africans, liberation process is over, you are now free, embrace racist capitalism and live. That is what he said to Africans in Ghana when he went there. He said something not much different to Egyptian young people when he went to Cairo. He's a big-time bomber of Islamic places and so on. And all of us knew, anybody with any sense of history knew that Obama wasn't going to bring anything. I think his stuff on healthcare was and is an achievement, and I'm glad Trump was not able to overturn that, because African Americans and poor people benefit from it. Trump and the Republicans have taken it apart somewhat, but by no means all, and I certainly hope that that will be reinstalled by Biden, especially if the Republicans lose those 2 seats in Georgia and don't any longer dominate the Congress of the United States. I want to, I think, leave it there. Repeat, sorry that there isn't on the program somebody who's explicitly putting the pro-Trump argument, which I find alarming.
Okay. Yeah, it's just unfortunate that that's the case, because I've just got a message that the brother is not too well. That's why he's not here.
In that case, I hope he recovers soon and well, totally.
So now I'd like to bring in Brother Mandingo, and just to follow on from what some of the things that Brother Cecil was saying. There's no doubt that there was quite a large number of Africans. You did mention the church who supported Trump, and they cited things like his anti-abortion stance and so forth, why they thought he would be the right person for the job or to continue in that role. The other thing is, it's a pity Vasco wasn't here, because I know he had a great array of things that he wanted to bring forth to show. But be that as it may, I'd like to now bring in Brother Mandingo to follow up on what you heard from Brother Cecil. And the thing that I would like to put as well is that, yes, when we say hidden forces versus Pan-Africanism, the thinking was a lot of those forces are within the African Black American community itself, because we know that obviously the white community and the other communities are anti-us. But what I find alarming is that within the Black American African community, there's certain forces arising which is now splitting any kind of unity apart. So I hope Brother Mandingo can echo a bit more upon that.
But before Brother Mandingo comes, it would help if you said a little bit more about who you have in mind. I mean, I know that.
Well, no, Mandingo's going to cover that. I mean, that's Mandingo's area.
Okay, sorry, I did not.
He'll be covering.
Apologies. Yes,
he'll be covering. He'll be talking about some of those. Yeah, Mandingo?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, man, loud and clear.
Yeah, first of all,
the only thing, you're a bit dark. You can hardly see your face, you know. It's all right. Well, yeah. Carry on.
First of all, I give thanks and praises to Onyame Olodumare, the Chuku, the Onyame, the creator, this Sunday, the 15th of November, 2020. Before I go, who started whilst at school in Jamaica in the 1960s with my physics teacher, Marcus Garvey Jr., the son of Marcus Garvey, and others in our party, the African Nationalist Union. And where Marcus Garvey is concerned to, his mother, which is the second wife, Amy Jakes Garvey, was an elder who I was a frequent visitor to her home, and she taught me a lot. And of course, his first wife, Amy Ashwood Garvey, my mother's cousin. So when it comes on to Marcus Garvey, my connections are solid. And I am saying categorically, whether Vasco Stevenson or anyone as an African, irrespective of what they call themselves or label themselves, saying that they are Pan-Africanists or whatever. No Pan-Africanist, I Mandingo, I'm saying to the world that no Pan-Africanist can and would ever say that Donald Trump was good. Donald Trump is an outright racist against the African race. So is Joe Biden. As I said last week, Joe Biden is the fox. Donald Trump is the wolf. So there's no way that any Pan-Africanist would ever say that Donald Trump represents good. Why does Mandingo say this? The track record speaks for itself. Before he was into politics per se, he was into his their kind of reality pop whatever show that he used to be involved with. And Joe Biden came into politics as a counselor in 1970. So we're talking 50 years. So in terms of politics, Joe Biden has been in it for 50 years, starting as a counselor in 1970, whilst Trump is just a few years, about 4 years roughly, okay, and so on. But what has Trump done? Why Mandingo? I Mandingo. I'm saying that he's an outright racist and that as a Pan-Africanist, he's my mortal enemy and the mortal enemy of Africans. One of the things was referring to our African countries in Africa and the Caribbean as S-hole countries. That's racism, plain and straight. And you have mentally enslaved Africans. I've heard them in the US, in the Caribbean, in Britain, in Africa, and elsewhere, agreeing with this racist. And the only ones who could ever agree with that racist insult towards African countries by Trump is one who is mentally enslaved. And I don't take back any talk. That's one example of his racism. But you know, it is ironic that he's calling African countries in the Caribbean and in Mother Africa S-hole countries. But which is the S-hole country right now? Trump, you have shown that the USA is the S-hole country right now. And you have done it all by yourself because of your vanity and your desire to be president for life. So, you know, we have a saying in Jamaica, you know, you're throwing stones, you're pointing fingers, but it's about you. So, sort out your S-hole country, Donald Trump. Another example of his racism. Examples. Every time Africans have been murdered in the USA by racists, he always sides with the racist murderers. There was a case when some racists drove into some protesters, and some of them were injured, some were killed, and he was making excuses for them and saying that some of them are good people, equating equating these racist murderers and terrorists, calling them good people. And they know, because he uses code language, quote unquote, because everyone knows what he means. When he said, make so-called America great again, he meant make the USA be under the full control of his European race again,
Yes.
because he saw, and the other races, that their power was slipping. Let's understand this reality. The apex of USA imperialist power was in 1945 at the end of the Second European World War.
Mhm.
I repeat, the apex, the summit of European imperialist power, being the USA as the leading one, was at the end of the 1945 war, when the USA Europeans effectively took over and demoted the #1 European power before that, the British Empire. A simple example, before 1945, the #1 currency in the world was the English pound, the sterling. And what the US Europeans did, they were determined to supplant the British Empire. And they demanded that the British were in need of money and other resources from them. That the only way that they would lend them money and help them otherwise was that they had to give up the pound sterling as the #1 currency in the world for it to be replaced by the US dollar. And the British delegation, led by their economists, Keynes, tried to avoid that. But the USA imperialists were not having it. And so the British imperialists had to bow. And since 1945, the dollar, the USA dollar, has been the #1 currency. That's why in terms of buying oil and so many things, because they know they use currency as part of their essential arm of economic imperialism, which they use to terrorize the rest of the world. And so, take for example, the killing, the murder of George Floyd. Trump again, for almost 9 minutes, over 8 minutes, almost 9 minutes, because I, as a Pan-Africanist, it is always my duty to monitor not just other Pan-Africanists, but also to monitor my enemies, our enemies. So everything that Trump does, I always pay close attention to, because it is my duty to monitor my enemy. And he gave comfort to the racist cop and cops who murdered George Floyd. You don't have to believe me, Mandingo. You heard what I said? Just check the records and you will find out that in every instance of racist murders, in every instance of racist attacks against Africans in the USA, Trump has always been on the side of the racist murderers, directly and indirectly. It's on record. So I rest my case where that is concerned. And what this means is that I am definitely against, and I'm weary against any African who is a supporter and a devotee of that racist Donald Trump. Because you cannot have the interests of the African race at heart and support a racist like Donald Trump. That's the reality. And today, I also want to pay respect to one of the great Pan Africanists who influenced me in my youthful days at Kingston Technical. In fact, even before I went to Kingston Technical. I'm talking about, and I have to mention someone who was with him who was another great influence with me. In fact, when I was going to Campion College before going to Kingston Technical, I'm talking about Brother H. Rap Brown, who is still in prison, still a political prisoner, who I want to be free, and who I over the years have been joining with others in the campaign for H. Rap Brown to be free, was a member of SNCC. And also my other beloved brother from the 1960s. He was known as Stokely Carmichael at the time. Born June 1941, Port of Spain, Trinidad. Came to the States, USA, at the age of 11. Went to School of Science, Bronx, School of Science. Went to Howard University, did a BA in philosophy, and got a full graduate scholarship for Harvard. But he rejected it because he decided, which he did, to dedicate his life for the service of his African race. And Richard Wright, one of our great writers, in 1954 had a book published called Black Power. And it was based around a visit that he made in 1953 to what was then known as the Gold Coast. And it was an account of him as an individual African and his experiences in relating, going to the motherland. So he had a book published in 1954 based on that trip to the Gold Coast, as it was called by the British then, Ghana, President Kwame Nkrumah later. Okay? Right? That was the title of a book. Title of a book. But in terms of coining and popularizing, we are talking ideologically now. Black Power. That belongs to Stokely Carmichael, who in the 1960s chanted Black Power, and with Professor Charles V. Hamilton wrote a book in the 1960s that I and others in Jamaica read at our peril, because the government, the JLP government of Hugh Lawson Shearer, had banned all Black Power books in Jamaica. If we were found with copies of the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was the book that triggered me to be a Pan-Africanist, if we were found with Black Power, written by Stokely Carmichael and Charles Hamilton, we would be jailed because it was banned literature. And of course, H. Rap Brown's book, Die, you know what die, because I don't use that racist word. And other books like Spook Who Sat by the Door, Look Out Whitey, Black Power Gonna Get Your Mama, and other books like that. Okay? And so on. 22 years ago, in Conakry, Guinea, West Africa, the place where President Secretary was the president, and where President Kwame Nkrumah, after he was overthrown by traitors with the help of the British imperialists, MI6, and with the help of the CIA. And this is why I was so angry when Ghanaians, yes, I'm saying Ghanaians, made Barack Obama a tool of the racist European USA imperialists, come to Ghana and was lecturing, so-called lecturing Africans in Ghana about governance and about freedom and liberty. And none of them took him to task publicly to say, why don't you apologize for the overthrow of President Kwame Nkrumah by the USA imperialist regime that you now represent? The very nerve and cheek of Barack Obama in the land of Ghana, where President Kwame Nkrumah, who said that the book that influenced him more than any other book was The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, the greatest Pan-Africanist this world has ever known. Brother Kwame Ture, 22 years ago, joined the ancestors. But the works that he performed live on and inspire us continuously. And I remember that when he came to this country in the 1960s, I was in Jamaica and he was on a tour and he spoke, and my friend Loxley Comrie was here with him also. Also my friend Dr. Tony Martin then. And he made a speech called The Dialectics of Liberation, where he showed how the European racists use racism over class in oppressing and persecuting our African people. The Dialectics of Liberation, where Brother Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael then, showed how, despite the class analysis, Africans suffered from racism and still do to this day. And it was my pleasure that years later, in the last century too, when he came to this country, I had the pleasure of meeting him when he spoke at Friend's House in Houston, in London. And it was so beautiful to hear our brother. And we had very good private discussions. And guess why he was able to come in, even though he had been banned? He came in not as Stokely Carmichael, but came in as Kwame Ture. And the so-called smart British never realized until it was too late that, oh, this is the Stokely Carmichael that we had banned. But by then, Kwame Ture had done the work that he had come to do. So long live the memory of our brother, great Pan-Africanist, Kwame Ture. 22 years ago, since he joined the ancestors. President Secretary is gone. President Mugabe is gone. President Kwame Nkrumah is gone. Pan-Africanist elders, giants, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey and others gone, Francis Cress Wilson and so on. But the works that they did has given us inspiration to continue where they left off. Because remember, Pan-Africanism is not stagnant. It is about constant work. Every generation of Africans, it is their duty to strengthen Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism is the only thing to prevent the extermination or the enslavement of Africans at home and abroad. Asante Sana for now, but I am ready to deal with those mentally enslaved tribalists in the USA calling themselves ADOS and Black American Foundation. And I'm calling names because I'm an African soldier. I'm talking about this guy, Tariq Nasheed, Hidden Colors. Are that right? We're talking about hidden. Promoting, he and his type, tribalism and division amongst African people. Saying that if your ancestors were not born and bred in the US from in the last century, from 1870 backwards, then you were not entitled. You were not an African in the US. In fact, they don't call themselves African. They call themselves Black American Foundation. Nonsense, stupid term. Goes to show denying their Africanness and American descendants of slaves. Check that expression. ADOS. But I'm glad I did Spanish at school in Jamaica. ADOS. Reminiscence of saying goodbye in Spanish. Adios. American descendants of slaves. Do you know what that is really saying? It means that all your history is about starting in slavery. You never had any history before. American. So you're not African, you know. You're American. And can you imagine this so-called America is supposed to refer to what I correctly term the North-South continent. Remember, I call it the North-South continent because America is coming from the Italian Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian, right? So you aping a racist Italian, just like Christopher Columbus, Cristobal Colon, right? Calling yourself American, and you're a descendant of slaves. So you don't have anything to do with the fact that your African ancestors created the world's first civilizations. You don't start there. You start your story, your history in chattel enslavement. That shows you the mentality of Tariq Nasheed. Now he says something, and you have to be very careful. He says something about our people. He said something about...
correct something, Mandingo, quickly.
He said something.
Yeah, about, but I'll just correct you a little bit. When it comes to ADOS, Tariq Nasheed has specifically said that he has nothing to do with ADOS.
Yes, he used to be, and then he got involved in this Black American Foundation thing, foundational thing. He and them, they fell out. And attacking are both organizations because both of them are divisive and anti-African. Both of them. Both of them. He was with the ADOS people and then he switched to this foundation thing. No, I checked him out. So I know both of them are guilty of divisionism. In it, I heard him talking about Marcus Garvey was from Jamaica and Stokely Carmichael, doesn't say Kwame Ture, you know, Stokely Carmichael was from Trinidad. And like they said, and Malcolm X, oh, his mother was from Grenada. You see this divisive thing that this guy, Tariq Nasheed, and check his name. Tariq. That's an Arab name. Why doesn't he attack the Arab racist Muslims? But he's using an Arab name, Tariq and Nasheed. Those are not African names. Those are Arab Muslim racist names. And we know that the Arab Muslims were enslaving our people long before the Europeans got into that. But he's not addressing that. So I have absolutely nothing to do with both groups, their so-called American Foundation thing and thing, because what it is there are a fifth columnist set of coots who are being used by the racists to try to demoralize, confuse, and segment Africans seeking to come together. Because remember, confusion is a tactic in warfare. When a people are confused, they must lose. And this guy is promoting confusion and disunity and trying to making us targets, both groups making us targets, Africans from the Caribbean and Africans from Mother Africa, whom he refers to in derogatory terms. And that group that he fell out with, ADOS, there's a girl in it, she's no sister, called Yvette Carnell. I know about her from many, many years ago, because I was in a group that she was in many years ago. And eventually I left that group. It was a group, some guy in the States called Boyce Watkins, something another, right? And I used to notice that whenever I advanced the Pan-Africanist position, which I always do, she kept totally silent. She only spoke about the situation of Africans in the US, and she only used the term Black Americans. Now I know why. Now I know why. So these are self-hating Africans who deny their Africanness. And they even come with the big lie that the native people, and the native people in the States are not Indians. Columbus, I never used that stupid thing. I did geography. I know where the Caribbean is, right? Columbus thought he was at some islands near to India, and so called it the Indies. There are no Indians in the North-South continent or in the Caribbean. There are native peoples who have their names, whether Caribs, Tainos, Cherokee, Apache, or whatever. The people have their names. Use their names. I always reject that false name about calling the people Indians. They are not Indians, and they are not Americans either, because they are not children of Amerigo Vespucci. Okay? The Italian. Call them what they are, right? And what I noticed that both of those groups do is tell the big lie that Africans were there and those people were not the natives. A big lie. But you know, they say truth is stranger than fiction. And some of our people are ignorant. Believe this lie, that the native people in the Caribbean and in the North-South continent, in so-called USA, the north part of it, which adjoins to what is called Canada, so-called Canada, that they weren't there. They weren't there. It was Africans who were there. A big lie. But you know, there's a saying, you know, when you keep repeating a lie, if it is not challenged, people will believe it. And you keep repeating a lie, you will believe the lie. And I rest my case for now, because anything else, I'm ready to go on. But let me summarize by saying that both groups, Tariq Nasheed and Yvette Carnell's group, they're in the dispute. Yes, let them fight each other. They are anti-African and divisionists. And it is our duty as Pan-Africanists to fight against such enemy agents within the African race. And it is our duty to fight against the racists who control both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because both parties are not for us as Africans. They only use Africans who are gullible and ignorant. Asante sana for now.
Okay. So yes, Mandingo, you made at least you have clarified a lot of things and put it out there. So I don't know if Elder Pepperkai, you got anything to say, or Elder Cecily, you're free to come in.
First, let me say salutation to Brother Mandingo for reminding us to remember our great hero, Kwame Ture, because he loudly made the call for Black Power. And it is sad that almost 50 years hence, having not achieved Black Power, we put in our hopes on 2 old white men for salvation. And we really have to ask ourselves, how did we carelessly find ourselves in this position? In fact, I have a book in front of me by our great ancestor, Amos Wilson. And the title is The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. And I would strongly recommend this to Rashid and company. Because, sadly, because of conquest, enslavement, colonialism, and neocolonialism, we have recovered our mind. And there's a deep entrenchment of self-hatred, which bring about self-defeat. This issue about Republican and Democrats, in fact, our history will show that at one time, the Republican Party was a little bit progressive when we had dominated at a particular time. And those same white men of America and the whole of Europe bring about our demise in that Reconstruction period. So we have to ask ourselves, where are we now and where do we go from here? And where we are, that we have to defeat this self-hatred and therefore end this self-defeat and move towards liberation. Because there's a very erroneous common held belief that we are our worst enemy. My beloved brother Cecil and the panel totally and utterly reject that. And you have a nicer way of putting it. He said, how did he put it again? We're weird and wonderful. So we have to get rid of the weird bit and come to the wonderful people that we are. Because we're not a worst enemy. Because we don't really understand the length and breadth that white supremacy, global white supremacy, goes towards keep us locked into self-hatred and self-defeat. Because it's only recently that we know of one of the tactics, one of the strategies used to undermine our efforts. Because sometimes we do things and we ask ourselves, are we stupid? Why are we so much working in our own demise as a worst enemy? And we didn't know about what is commonly called the economic hitman. And the economic hitman is simple, a trained operative who either work for a white government, whether it's USA, Britain, Canada, France, doesn't matter which. I work for any one of these major corporations that want our resources and are not prepared to pay for it. So the economic hitman will get on a plane, land in the target country, and end up in the president's office and say, Mr. President, I represent XYZ government or corporation, and I'm here to make you an offer. I'm directed to make you two offers, one of two offers. In that bag is a whole heap of money, millions of dollars. It's for you. In replacement of that, you want your oil or your cobalt or whatever it is that is the desired material. And if the president is about wanting to develop the resources for the people, he will say, well, thank you, but no thank you. These resources are for the people. And the economic hitman reminded him and said, Mr. President, I did say I've got two offers. And if you reject one, you'll get the other. And the other is a bullet in your head. Which one you want? And of course, that particular president would have to think. And he probably would reason to say, well, if I don't take the money, I get a bullet, that'll be the end of me. I tell you what, I take the money because I live to do something different and something better. At least I'll be alive. Now what I'm saying is no fiction, it's facts. We have to understand how white supremacy works, what it is, and how it functions in the world in which we live. And we as a people are ill prepared because we're coming from the business of self-hatred, and self-hatred fosters self-defeat. When I was a boy going to school in Jamaica, I remember my school teacher saying, there was a geography lesson, and she said, when she mentioned Montserrat, all the children, and if I'm not honest, probably I did as well, we all laugh and said, oh, they meet rat down there. That's why they call them Montserrat. And the teacher never correct us, never said, look, they use brothers and sisters. We all come from Africa. And they had no control, the ancestors had no control as to which island they were deposited. So everywhere we were deposited, we were there to work to make Europe powerful and white people powerful. Teacher didn't tell us anything like that because she didn't know herself. Because after she moved away from the geographical bit of the lesson, she was talking about how industrial Britain was. And she said to us, look, cars, how they manufacture cars, they get all the bits and they throw it in the machine and the car roll out at the other end. I'm not lying. I was taught that at school. And I lived to come to Britain and I read and get to understand how cars are made. And an axle's put on here, a chassis put on here, man come with spanner and bolt it up. And it's only recently we have production line of robots. But in 1960, 59, 55, Those at the time when I was going to school, no such thing exists in the whole world. Nothing like that. Not in Japan, not in Korea, not in Germany, nowhere. But yet, that was put into my head by the teacher. Where did that information come from? That is part of the curriculum set by the colonialists that we who call ourselves independent nations have not sorted. In fact, as we sit here, no country, no place in the entire world where we as African are the majority and appeal to exercising state power have an African curriculum that is geared towards ending self-hatred and self-defeat. And what we must focus on is what we have to do in earnest to defeat self-hatred and self-defeat. Because this business that we know Black American, which is different from Afro-American, we have to ask ourselves, in 2020, how did we come to that? Because if we have any sense, Black and African is different sides of the same coin. Because some of us have a problem with being called Black, and I think that's a mistake. We are Black people. The Black land is not because the color of the land was black, while ancient people Kemet called it the Black land Kemet. It's because we, the Black people, occupy it. As Black people, we're African. There's no other African. There's no brown African, white African. We're one African. What happens to the Black? White people who don't look white, but they say they're white, and we're not going to waste time arguing with them. They don't argue that they're not European, and European don't mean white. It's one and the same thing. So we shouldn't get too hung up with that. But most important, we should not be sowing seed of discord about division, that we were here as the residue of slavery, and those who come after are not African. Absolute nonsense. We who were brought here to the Americas, our experience are not very different from those of us who were dropped off in the Caribbean. There are differences, but they're not major differences, because we all suffer the same brutality, and we all become handicapped of those same brutality. So the focus must be, how do we reconnect with Garveyism and begin to make Garveyism not just a nostalgic romance affair, but the labor of hard work to bring about the achievement of race pride, one nation, one people. So I'll hold on that for now, so that in closing, we can begin to focus on where we have gone wrong and how we need to put it right.
Okay. Right. So I'd like to move on by saying, hold on, there's a lot of feedback here. Yeah, by saying, given that groups like Black Lives Matters, ADOS, and Foundational Black Americans Hold on, I'm gonna mute some of you because there's too much background noise coming. Yeah, given that those groups I just mentioned none of them have Pan-Africanism at their core. Yeah. Now, the question is, what threat do you think they are to Pan-Africanism? Do you think they pose a threat, an overall threat to Pan-Africanism? Because if you look at a group like Black Lives Matters, undoubtedly it has been able to galvanize Africans, especially in America, in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even into the millions. And likewise, ADOS is a growing phenomenon. And now fundamental Black Americans is also another growing phenomenon. So what threat do you think they pose to Pan-Africanism overall? Anybody's free to come.
Am I being heard?
Yeah.
Yes,
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Okay. All right. Thanks for what's been said by all concerned. I think that we have to be careful with our brothers and sisters when they're trying to deal with the specifics of their situation. How has this ADOS thing arisen? It has arisen, it seems to me, because African Americans feel and find themselves falling behind other more recent arrivals in the United States, including other more recent African arrivals, and that includes us from the Caribbean and a whole set of Africans from the continents, especially since the Second World War. Now, and it's actually true that two things happened in that period after the United States Civil War. African Americans, having fought to win that war, got a moment of kind of space in the open, and then all force in the United States of America came down on them with maximum massive brutality. The purpose of that maximum massive brutality was to terrorize them into submission, and that process actually worked. And so when in the 19th and early 20th century, Africans from the Caribbean were going to the United States of America, and this is documented, we had two advantages. One is that we tended to be actually reasonably well educated, and the other advantage is that we carried with us our British citizenship, and it gave us something of a privileged position inside of the United States. So we were, even though we come from difficult circumstances in the Caribbean, we hadn't been terrorized in the way that African Americans were. And that has worked to our advantage. And if you look at the so-called African American leadership, a massive proportion of us from the Caribbean are present in that leadership. And that's what some African Americans are trying to solve using entirely the wrong tools. And one of the wrong tools that they're using is that they are trying to say that their specifics arise from the fact that they were enslaved in the United States of America. The truth of the matter is that it is not their enslavement in the United States of America that makes them distinct, because that enslavement wasn't all that different from what we in the Caribbean or we in Brazil went through. What's specific about them is the depth of the brutality that was imposed upon them by white America in the period since the Civil War, where all kinds of terror, including lynching in the thousands annually, was imposed on them, in which you could be walking down a road and some white woman says that you have looked at her and they call it eye rape and you get lynched. So terrible things happen to African Americans, and they have undoubtedly been left behind in the United States of America. And we, from outside of there, even if we've been there for a long time, need to understand what is happening and work with them. The line they're going down is fundamentally misguided. Our brother Mandingo is right about that, but we have to understand what historically prompted the line they're presently taking, and that their history does include a reign of terror that wasn't experienced by us outside of us other Africans in the West, and in particular in the North-South continent, as Brother Mandingo calls it, that that the African Americans in the United States of America went through. So now a lot of reactionary politics creeps into our movement. There's reactionary politics in the Caribbean, there's reactionary politics in the continent of Africa. All of that is against the interest of the masses, the majority of Africans, and all of it is against the interest and proper functioning of Pan Africanism. But we mustn't just target African Americans, some of whom, and it's not the people at the bottom, it's their leadership who are getting it wrong, focusing on the wrong part of their own history and coming up with a wrong divisive solution. But we have to understand what is happening there. With regard to Black Lives Matter, I think, again, it's important that we understand what is happening there. And my understanding of it is that what Brother Tahaka just said is actually not correct. Black Lives Matter isn't mobilizing a mass movement. What happened is that about 4 years ago, a little bit more than that, the United States state killed a particular black man. I forget his name, right? And there was a mass movement, not promoted and not even particularly organized by Black Lives Matter, a spontaneous United States-wide popular movement that had some white people in it, but was basically African American. Now, inside of that moment, a set of young people, mainly women, apparently largely lesbian, coined the term Black Lives Matter and registered it as a, I don't know what you call it, but registered it in some way. And because of who they are and because of their tendencies, money has been attracted to them. But you cannot attribute, for example, what happened after the death of George Floyd to the Black Lives Matter clique. It's a spontaneous, worldwide, and particular African response to what that white policeman did to that particular black man by laying, as Brother Mandingo reminded us, for almost 9 minutes on his neck, even though he was saying long minutes before that, I can't breathe. Now, we mustn't let Black Lives Matter claim that they're really the organizers of that, because they are not, right? It's a spontaneous, largely actually unorganized movement. And insofar as it's organized, you've got to look to local organizers. And most of those local organizers aren't Black Lives Matter. They're people like you and me and much younger people than us who are bringing our people onto the street in town and city, country after country. Nothing to do with the people who captured, maybe invented and captured the notion Black Lives Matter and are making claims in respect of it that are not justified by the facts. So what we have to understand, and this may be repetition, is the nature of what is happening in the continuing movement in response to state brutality in the United States of America, and that same state brutality is here. Metropolitan Police is busy telling us that they're not institutionally racist, and the woman who's in charge of it says they can't be institutionally racist because after the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, the force set her to eliminate institutional racism, and she has done so. So there can't be any institutional racism. That's actually the argument that she mounts, and it defies the evidence. Just staying with the evidence of stop and search, that Theresa May reduced stop and search massively, not because she was particularly interested in its impact on us, but because she saw it correctly as a waste of state resources. They were stopping and searching millions of people annually, and next to no specific result other than in humiliating and terrorizing Black people were coming out of it. And what she said, you have to stop wasting the resources. That means stop pointlessly stopping and searching millions of people. They resented that move by Mrs. May, and their response to it, this is the police authorities in the UK, including Metropolitan Police, is stopping, since the numbers are reduced, a larger number proportionately and actual numbers of us than they ever did. And is not just Mrs. May, the London's mayor, the Prime Minister, who is a known racist of the UK, and Priti Patel, an Indian woman who's a known racist, all agree that somehow this racist stop and search thing is in our interest. They're doing it because we're killing each other, and they're actually stopping and searching us disproportionately, 9-1. There's a powerful and growing Black popular organization in the UK against that. And even if it comes out under the banner Black Lives Matter, it's nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It's actually to do with mobilizing forces in our community. And the same is true in the United States of America. So let's not attribute stuff to the organization, the entity, Black Lives Matter, that next to nothing is to do with them, and they're actually making a false claims in relation to it.
Yeah, but the question was, do these groups pose a threat to Pan Africanism? Because many young people are now stepping away from that movement, Pan Africanism, and openly saying they're not Pan Africanists. They are now ADOS, or they are now fundamental Black Americans, for example.
We have political challenges as Africans and as Pan-Africanists everywhere we are. Our young people come under all kinds of influences, some of them from within our community and some from outside, that we have to try to correct. I don't know where, with respect, you would get the figure, a figure that confirms that the people on the street in the US are following ADOS and saying that they're not African, because I don't know that that is true. And I don't know and don't believe it to be true here either. So, but reactionary tendencies arise, and our politics, as Brother Mandingo was saying, demands that we campaign inside and outside the community against backward tendencies.
Okay, Mandingo, you wanted to come in?
Yes. First of all, as a Pan-Africanist in the vein of Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, and others, definitions are always important. Correct definitions. Because when definitions are wrong, they create problems and only aid our enemies. If you notice, I never ever refer to our people as Black, because no person is Black. That's totally incorrect. No person is Black, and no person is white. That's a fact, and that's not because I was a prize Marcus Garvey Jr.'s best physics student. no color. No person is black or white. And what I have found out from Jamaica, from before I came here, you have a lot of people full of self-hatred who will tell you that they are black, but they are not African. So this thing of black is a very dangerous thing because it's a denial. It's a common thing that I have grown up with and I've experienced to this day. Oh, I am black, but I am not African. And I find that such individuals exhibit the most virulent form of racism against those who they say are Africans, meaning born in Africa, when we are all Africans. And this is why I always champion the Peter Tosh tune, African, that no matter where you're born, no matter where you come from, black does not, it's an inaccurate and wrong color description. It does not relate to a geographic land reality. When you say you're African, it's Africa. Chinese don't say they are amarillos, meaning yellow. When you say Indians, India. When you say Chinese, China. When you say Arabs, Arabia. When you say Europeans, European. So call it like it is, one term. As Marcus Garvey Jr., as 7th President General of our organization in the last century said, and our party before in Jamaica from the 60s, one word for us, we are Africans. End of story. No other term. And there's no compromise where that is concerned. We are no Afro this and Afro that, or African American or hyphenation rubbish. Yeah. And that's not gonna change as a Pan-Africanist. We're not going to compromise on our identity as Africans to suit no one. Simple. Take it or leave it. Black Lives Matter. What is going on, as Brother Cesar say, is not due to them. It's spontaneous. What happened with Rodney King and many other people, there was no so-called Black Lives Movement about. When things happened in the 60s, when H. Rap Brown said, burn, baby, burn, Watts, Detroit, and all over, there was no Black Lives Movement. It is our spontaneous uprising as Africans. What has happened? Because I am not going to give credit where credit is not due. This Black Lives Movement thing, so-called movement, because it's not an organization, it's a little syndicate clique, came out of the murder of Trayvon Martin. Teenager. Trayvon, right, who was murdered by this racist. And what they did, 3 lesbians, because as a Pan-Africanist, I study both friends and foes. Always do. I study internal and external. When this Black Lives Matter thing came about, I made an in-depth study of them. And I found out that it's 3 lesbians, Africans by race. One of them has a Nigerian connection. But 3 African females who are lesbians. One of them is married to a he, she, or a she, he. Why I say that? Her husband, so-called, is a transgender male. Meaning that born as a female and now says that she is a male. The he, she, or the she, whatever permutations or combination you want to use with that. Okay? Right? Now, there is no way. And what I've noticed is that they have used legitimate protests about the murder of Trayvon Martin and others for mileage for themselves, and have gotten money from racist elements too for their campaign of their LGBT agenda. And I have noticed that in their literature, they try try to demote and exclude the role of the man as the father. So in other words, they're using the legitimate and natural protests of our people and people of other races of goodwill, right, against these racist murders to be promoting their LGBT agenda. And I find that offensive and I reject that. You have your LGBT thing, which is what the three of them are. Deal with that. But do not use the murders of mostly African men and boys in the States for your agenda. I am totally and absolutely against that. And when it comes on to the so-called American descendants of slaves and also thing, let us remember. Let us remember, because when in my case I know, let us remember that not all Africans born and bred in the States have that mentality.
Absolutely.
That get that straight. I, Mandingo, have scores, not one and two, scores of African relatives on both my father's side and my mother's side, born and bred in the USA. They are my blood family and we are close. This nonsense and divisionist thing, that doesn't work with them and I, because they know that we are Africans and they know the circumstances. There are also African brothers and sisters in the States who are not immediately related to me, who do not subscribe and endorse that type of divisionism. So that negative backward step is a minority amongst our people. It's a minority. It's a takeover thing. But what it is the duty of Pan Africanists to kill such tendencies. Because it's like a garden, you know. You have a beautiful garden. If you allow just one weed to grow, more weeds are gonna come. So wherever you find this tendency, you must root it out and destroy it. Don't allow it to spread. And that is one of our tasks as Pan-Africanists. And this is why I condemn publicly those misguided Africans like Yvette Carnell, Tone, say I know the names, you know, Tariq Nasheed, because I studied them. That our people are not to follow them, because for our people to follow them means the destruction of our people and our solidarity. Yes, we know the circumstances, the reign of terror that Africans in the USA underwent. We know, because we underwent it, our ancestors in chattel enslavement in the Caribbean, in Mother Africa and so on. We know the specifics, but let us realize that wherever we are in the world, we face the same racist foes and enemies. And it must always be our duty to close ranks. Does that mean that Africans in the States must not have specific organizations to deal with certain things within their specific localities? No, they must have things to deal with their immediate situation. Just like Africans in Jamaica, for example, have certain things to deal with. And it's their duty to deal with that. Africans in London have certain specific things to deal with. And it is their duty to deal with it. Africans in Birmingham have certain things, and Manchester, you get the flow, have certain things to deal with. In Abuja, in Nairobi, wherever we are, there are certain specifics that must never be ignored and must always be dealt with. But let us, not in dealing with the specifics, be blinded by the overall situation that we as Africans face. And what we must do, as Marcus Garvey correctly identified, is that where we as Africans can assist other Africans in their specific localities in certain issues, we must render that assistance. That is what Pan-Africanism is about. So Africans, for example, in say, Texas, need certain help in a specific situation. We don't leave it just to Africans in Boston or Africans in New York to help them. We Africans in London, we Africans in Kingston, in Port of Spain, in Bridgetown, in Echo, in Accra, where we can help, we must help. This is why Marcus Garvey's organization, the UNIA and the ACL, was global. Because our situation is global. And we cannot be successful if we don't deal with our global problems on a global level. And it's as simple as that. So we do not put down the right of Africans within respective communities of dealing with particular situations, because this is only natural. But at the same time, we don't use that to create barriers in terms of uniting with our wider African family. We must remember, either we will survive together or we will be exterminated together. There's no in between. Asante Sana for now on that.
Okay. Well, we run out of time. Nduga Man is here. But just to wind up, hold on, I'm getting some echo. Somebody's listening back to the broadcast. Okay, so just to wind up, yes, that point I think was very well answered by Elder Sesson and Mandingo, because it's important for us to realize that, yes, as Pan-Africanists, that's the upward Pan-Africanists. Now it's a shame that these groups are experts in courting, say, publicity. So it gives the impression that they are much larger than they are, because you look all over the media and they are everywhere. So to a young person coming up, that's the thing to belong to, because let's be honest, where are the Pan-Africanists? Where in the media are the Pan-Africanist voices everywhere competing with these others? You know, we're nowhere to be found in comparison to these other people. Yes, I do believe fundamentally common sense will prevail and does prevail. And the vast majority of Africans, may it be in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, on the continent, do have a Pan-Africanist tendency and do see themselves as Pan-Africanists. But at the same time, we must be on our guard that these groups, led by very skillful people who know how to get their message across, who know how to use the media, who are experts on social media and are bombarding especially young minds, young African minds, with their propaganda. So I would put the word out to Pan-Africanists now for us to take up that mantle and for us to let our voice be heard and for us to be also become experts in terms of media and social media and be constantly there to remind that us that Pan-Africanism is a movement that can only go from strength to strength, because Pan-Africanism, if we think about it, is really and truly the only salvation for African people. Not,
Listen, I need
not
to say
black
something.
people, as Mandingo say, not black people. Let's get away from the term black people. That's what's causing all the confusion. Let those who want to refer to themselves as black carry on, because it's an empty term. And they would find that they are walking down a blind tunnel at the end of the day, because there's nothing lies. There's nothing productive in our lives at the other side. And let's stick to the word African, because that's the ultimate
And be
word
proud
that's
of it.
bring us together. Precisely. And be proud of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just before
brother Tarka, let me just say this. What happens, you see this platform, PACMTV, is an example. It is only one example of Pan-Africanist platforms that fight against that wrong tendency that Tariq Nasheed and Yvette Carnell and those like that are pushing. Let us not think that they have it all going their way, because this is only one of many Pan-Africanist platforms that reject publicly what they are doing. Because the thing is that it's a battle for the minds of our people. And so I, as a journalist, am engaged in many platforms, always have been, because it's always a constant battle for the minds of our people, because we cannot win a war if we do not have our people on our side. And so that mental struggle is always constant. And from time to time, you will always have negative individuals coming with these divide and rule tactics. This is nothing new. Marcus Garvey experienced it in his time. Kwame Ture experienced it in his time. Malcolm X experienced it in his time. Francis Cress Welsing. In other words, in every generation, you always have the negative elements. As a physics student, in physics we know there are always opposites. That's a reality in life. Plus and minus. Hot and cold. So you will always have opposite tendencies. What it is for Pan-Africanists to do is that we, on the positive side, which is Pan-Africanists, must work intelligently, ruthlessly, yes, ruthlessly, and consistently to defeat the negative forces, because life exists of the positive and the negative. As in electricity, for things to happen, you have to have the positive and the negative, hot and cold. But it is who is going to triumph. It must be us as Pan-Africanists to triumph every time over the anti-Pan-Africanist forces, individuals who are found within the African race and outside the African race, because we are waging a war on two fronts at the same time. It's a war waged on two fronts simultaneously. We have to deal with our internal enemies, which is what these individuals represent, and we also have to deal with our external enemies, who we know. So it's not a either or either. We fight a war as always, in every generation, on two fronts, the internal and the external. This is the reality.
Closing comment, Brother Talker, before we close, because I wouldn't like for people to go away the idea that I am on the Black Lives Matter side and the Tariq side on this question of blackness. Ever since I was a child, color matters. And if you look at the spectrum, you have what you call the blue-black to almost white. We have a situation whereby the people of Kemet call the land Kemet, meaning the black land. And it's not because the soil is black, but the people of Kemet is jet black, blue-black. Blackness is not a shame, it's pride. My skin color is on the lighter side of black, but I'm blacker than a post midnight. We must understand that blackness and African is not in competition, is not opposite of each other, it's just different sides of the same coin. And there was a time when blackness come under attack and we're running away from blackness and feel ashamed to be black. We should not. We're African who happens to be black. And we're black people. We're African. That's our skin color. But that doesn't say that's all we are. That's just our skin color. We're African. That is unmistakable. That's who we are. And Africans are black people. We need to come back onto this subject another time.
Brother Pemukai, let me just say this. In Marcus Garvey's flag in 1920, red, black, and green. Red for the blood that must be shed for redemption. Green for the green fields of Africansa. And I repeat, and this is a scientific fact. This is the truth. This is not an opinion or point of view. No individual is black in color, and no individual is white in color. I say that without fear of it. That's a fact. That's a scientific fact. What the black? Hold on, let me finish. Hold on. What the black? No one is black in color, literally. That's not true. And no one is white in color, literally either. That's a fact, scientific fact. And what I'm saying is the black in Marcus Garvey's flag for the African race. And listen to what I'm saying carefully. Symbolizes the African race.
That's all right.
You must get the difference between symbol is different from literal. Understand? Symbol is different from literal. Like, for example, the lion is a symbol for the Ethiopian country. It don't mean that the Ethiopians are lions or lionesses.
Yes, man, we're lion.
So black is merely symbolic and not literally. You understand what I am saying?
Okay. Finally, I'll just ask Elder Cecil just to make the closing remarks before I go to Ndugwe.
No, I think that this last discussion would be worth pursuing. I don't think claims around blackness and its importance are anything to do with literal blackness or literal whiteness. It's to do with a way of speaking of differences in skin color. And the association in the Peter Tosh song, it says, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man. And so the black and the African thing go together. But it's worth going back to that discussion because I believe it matters. And I think we should leave this here and maybe pick it up on some early time to take it further.
And I'll be saying the same thing.
All right. Okay, so all right. So at this point now, I'll ask Unduga Mani to close the discussion for us with the change of energy.
Okay. Sawa. Asanteni sana wazee. So asanteni sana Baba Mandingo, Mzee Pepperkai, Mzee Cecil, and Ndugu Tahaka. Very enlightening. I'm sure people confirmed information that they knew already, and also learned stuff that they didn't know as well, and clarified some things. As Baba Mandingo says, it's a constant fight for us to clarify and be very clear on these terms, because technology is always at play. Okay, so we're now going to finish off our session with the ritual. Mabadiliko ya Nishati, the end of the ritual. So I will now, in Ndugu Tahaka, share my screen. Okay. Okay, Asante Sana. Asante Sana. Okay, Asante Sana basically means thank you. If you hadn't realized, brothers and sisters, in Kiswahili, and the words up you see on the screen are in Kiswahili. So, if you wish to take part in the end of the ritual of changing the energy, then please do. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. So, if you are, then please sit straight in whichever seat you're in, so that your 7 energy centers are in line with your spine, and straight in line. Feet flat on the floor, and hands on the palms of your hands on your thighs. So I'm going to ring the chime here, the triangle chime, 7 times again for intuition, wisdom seeking, and truth, which is the key to what we're talking today. And also, this end of the ritual is that we're giving thanks and appreciation to the powers that we called upon. Of course, the all within us, Wote, that is within us, centrally within us, our higher selves, and the ancestors, and the cosmic forces that underpin all things, all emanating from the one vibration, which is the all. So we're giving thanks and asking that they hear what we are saying, take our personal and our racial intentions back to their realms, from where the realm that we've called them into, and help us to manifest our objectives, and give us the wisdom and the will to put things into action. And there's no manifestation without action and intention. Intention is all. So I'll ring 7 times. Allow the vibration to go over you, around you, and through you. Breathe deeply. We're connected with each other, and then we end this particular connection and go in peace and love from each other, from the experience of being together. So I'll begin and I'll count. Moja. Mbili. Tatu. Nne. Tano. Sita. Saba. Asanteni sana. And so we end again on the affirmations and the words of power on the screen. So please just repeat after me. Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Kwa watu wetu.
Kwa watu wetu.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
All power to our people, and the will of the all is our will. And so I'm telling you
All
something.
power to our people, and the will of the all is our will.
Absolutely, Baba Mandinka.
Okay, so asante sana and good morning for that.
Very
So
good. You're welcome.
until next week.
Sana Indugu Imanu.
And Brother Parker,
Uh-huh.
I volunteer to lead the charge to retain Africa and Black whenever it come up. I'm gonna
Right. All right.
And I will maintain and merely repeat what I have said.
good.
All right.
Yes.
That
Of
should
course
be
it
an
would.
interesting one. That should be an
Let's
interesting.
have a lively debate.
Okay.
We could just continue the discussion next week.
Oh, all right. We'll see.
We could
We'll
just
see. We'll
continue
see.
the
We'll see.
discussion next
Whenever,
Yeah.
as
So
Kwame
whenever,
said,
but
ready for the revolution, to paraphrase Kwame Ture, ready for the revolution. I'm ready
Black power.
anytime. Always
all
ready.
right.
24/7
So
ticket force.
we're back again. I bid you
No
quite
retreat, no surrender. African.
quite